So the Columbia Wetlands is one of the largest and longest intact continuous wetland systems in all of North America, and it is the only undammed stretch of Columbia River that remains. So the Columbia River, as some of you may know, is a very significant river system. It's the fourth longest river within North America, and it extends approximately 2,000 kilometers. So it starts very close to us here, just south in Canal Flats and Columbia Lake. It heads ways north, and then it ends up extending southwards down into the United States, where it empties into Oregon State, the ocean out of Oregon State. The Columbia Wetlands System provides habitat for numerous wildlife species. In fact, 216 bird and mammal species have been identified in the Columbia Wetlands System. It's very special and important habitat for both migratory and resident birds, and it's a vital component of the Pacific Flyway for the migration during both spring and fall. The Columbia Wetlands supports spawning and rearing habitat for numerous fish species. It's also very critically important for numerous mammals, including grizzly bears, cougars, wolves, several ungulates, small mammals from the muskrat to small voles, as well as several amphibian and reptile species. The Columbia Wetlands has the second highest known density of nesting osprey in British Columbia, and it also has the second highest known density for nesting great blue herons within Western Canada at about 300 pairs. More information about the Columbia Wetlands. Like all wetland system, it is a very unique and nutrient-rich ecosystem where the terrestrial and aquatic habitats meet. And its wetlands throughout the world are considered to be the most productive habitat globally, all wetlands that are functioning healthily, I should say. Additionally, the Columbia Wetlands System provides numerous ecosystem services to the humans that live surrounding the wetlands. So ecosystem services can be considered as all of those benefits that humans acquire from nature. So that's it's an enormous number of things that humans acquire from nature. Everything from aesthetic views and recreational services, spiritual values and sense of place, to things like flood protection and water purification and filtration that the wetlands provide to us. The Columbia Wetlands has been recognized as a Ramsar site, so that means that it is recognized internationally as a wetland with significance, international significance. And the vast majority of the Columbia Wetlands are a wildlife management area, so they're managed by the provincial government primarily for its wildlife and wildlife values. There's 4 small parcels of national wildlife area that are managed by the federal government. It's a part of the significant Y-to-Y corridor that hopefully you're all familiar with. So this is a stretch of land that stretches from Yellowstone in the south all the way up to the Yukon, and it's a critical corridor that's necessary for us to maintain in order for us to make sure that we have habitat available for wildlife, especially large carnivores, well into the future, especially when things like climate change and things like that are on a forefront. And I have to say, though, although the wetlands is recognized with all these very significant conservation tools, it is not formally protected. So it's not a park or protected area, it's not an ecological reserve. So there's still some work that can be done. Oh. So I wanted to give you a little bit of information regarding some of the work that Wildsight has been involved with regarding the Columbia Wetlands and the work that they've done. I've been working with Wildsight-Golden for on and off for 8 years now. And so I've been involved with a number of these programs, and some of you, especially Jeff, would be familiar with Joan Dolinsky, the president of the local branch now for the past 25 years or so. And so she's been involved with numerous initiatives that I'll be going through here today as well as several other amazing volunteers in the community that we're so lucky to have and be involved with Wildsight. So I had mentioned that it is a Ramsar site rather, meaning that it has that international significance. And Wildsight was the agency that was officially responsible with making that application for the Columbia Wetlands to be a Ramsar site. Also, Wildsight's been involved with school-aged education programs in and amongst the wetlands for the past 25 years or so. In terms of Reflection Lake, there's been quite a lot of activities going on there with Wildsight. So Wildsight does Earth Day cleanups around Reflection Lake every year on Earth Day. They've been involved with doing educational bird watching field trips there for about 25 years. And additionally, they've established a bird watching kiosk with interpretive signage at Reflection Lake. Wildsight's also been involved with riparian restoration activities for the past 10 years or so, specifically around Horse Creek and also the confluence of the Columbia and Kicking Horse rivers. And we've also been, I spearheaded this program and developed this program called the Columbia Headwaters Invasive Plant Species Project that started in 2008. And so through that program, I monitored and inventoried over 20 different lakes in the region for their aquatic invasive plants and found none, I'm very happy to report, so ongoing diligence is required there. I've also been doing numerous terrestrial invasive plant inventories in the region since 2008. The Headwaters program involved a lot of different education and outreach materials. There is aquatic signage telling boaters, for instance, about the threats that aquatic invasive plants could pose to the Columbia Wetlands system. And it also shows you some of the invasive plants that we should be looking out for in our area. And that's an example of some of the outreach that we have out there in the community, or throughout the headwaters, rather. We are also doing water quality sampling on a couple of our local creeks. One of those tributaries feeds into the Columbia Wetlands, and that's Horse Creek, so we've been monitoring the water there since 2009, and we continue to do that. And we've also been running Golden's Community Weed Program. So this is a really cool program that's been in implementation since 2010. Wildsight developed and continues to manage that, but it is fully funded and supported by the town of Golden, which I'm very grateful for. So what now? Well, we're going to continue with our education and outreach with Golden's Community Weed Program and with the water quality sampling in Horse Creek and Ventigo Creek. And I'm also now developing this new program called the Columbia Wetlands Waterbird Survey. And I'm here to talk to you guys about that today, more specifically because I'm hoping that some of you would like to volunteer on this program. So I'm here sort of for that volunteer recruitment aspect. So the Columbia Wetlands Waterbird Survey aims to be a large-scale citizen science program. The first phase was funded by CBT, which I'm very grateful to CBT for all their support, funding and otherwise. And this large-scale citizen science program aims to collect valuable baseline data that is really lacking from the Columbia Wetlands. So although the system has been recognized for its significant bird values, there's really very little data that exists to document what, well, not so much what species we have, but in terms of what numbers we have for these species. And the overarching goal for this program, there's several benefits, and I'll get into those in a little bit, but the overarching goal is to hopefully enable the Columbia Wetlands to become an important bird area, or an IBA. So an important bird area is this science-based initiative that occurs globally, and it really aims to identify and conserve the most important areas in the world for birds and their habitat. They hold a significant conservation value. So if we were to obtain this important bird area or IBA status for the Columbia Wetlands, it would be another significant conservation tool that we could have for our amazing wetland system that we have. And I had mentioned that it's this global program. There's approximately 10,000 sites across the planet that have these important bird areas established on them. And there's approximately 600 across Canada. And in order to meet this criteria for the IBA, we need to identify, or count, I should say, approximately 1% of the continental or global threshold for a bird species in terms of its numbers. And so if we're able to do that, then it triggers this IBA status. And we would have to do that for at least 5 consecutive years. So that's why it is a long-term program. Just wanted to give you sort of a snapshot of the IBAs across British Columbia. And this is where I'm going to use this little fancy pointer thing. So, okay, we're over here. So the wetlands are here. So you can see there's kind of like a big blank area. There's not really any orange spots around there. So most of the IBAs are concentrated around southwestern British Columbia. We've got one down here in the Creston Valley Wildlife Management Area. And then there's one here just north of Cranbrook and Skookumchuck. But other than that, we don't have any IBAs in our area in the Columbia Basin, if you aren't including the Okanagan. And so it would be really significant for our region if we were able to obtain this IBA for the Columbia Wetlands. So what would be involved if you were to volunteer? Well, there's going to be surveys occurring in both the spring and the fall. The spring survey dates are pretty set, and the last one's going to be happening in combination with the Wings Over the Rockies festival that takes place in Invermere. And basically, we're trying to get everybody out there on the same days at the same time to try to count these birds that we would be seeing, waterbirds that we would be seeing at 40 select locations throughout the wetland complex. So all the way from Moberly Marsh, north around Donald, all the way south to Columbia Lake. So we're trying to recruit volunteers from all up and down the valley. Currently developing a training module for participants, so you certainly don't need to be an expert birder or a birder at all, in fact. I'm really encouraging folks that are just interested in contributing to real science and contributing to increasing the values of the recognized values of the wetlands to participate in the survey. And we're also developing a field guide for participants. So instead of having sort of that little, bird ID book that can be challenging for some folks to follow, it's going to be, one kind of large page per species that will really highlight what the bird looks like. And then all of the data is going to be entered into this online database system called eBird. And this is a fantastic resource that is available to everybody. And the reason it's going into eBird is because the agency responsible for determining whether or not we're able to achieve this important bird area status is going to be monitoring everything that we enter into this database system. So it makes it's an easy way for this sort of data sharing to occur. And we're asking volunteers to enter their own data, but if you don't want to do that, you just want to go out and observe the birds, that's great, and we're more than happy to enter the data for you. I'm also, as part of this Columbia Wetlands Waterbird Survey, although a Lewis's woodpecker is not a waterbird, it is a woodpecker, I'm going to be conducting these surveys in partnership with Canadian Wildlife Service. And the reasons for doing that is because they have an extremely low threshold in terms of being able to trigger this important bird area status. So if we're able to go out there on any single day and count 8 Lewis's woodpeckers, then we will trigger that IBA for the habitat area that's important for those Lewis's woodpeckers. The Lewis's woodpecker is a red-listed species, and it's endangered under the federal government, so it's a really important species, and we have a small population, but more than 8, in the East Kootenays and in the southern portion of the Columbia Wetlands and Columbia Lake. We're also going to be continuing on with the Wild Voices for Kids field trips, so those bird watching field trips at Reflection Lake. So we take out kids from ages grade 1 to grade 8 to go and learn about birds and to identify birds, and they have a fantastic time out there. They run around and go crazy and get excited about the birds, so it's really fun and an amazing educational experience for those kids. And we're also working on the development of a basin-wide bird education program, or rather, we will be in the near future. So some of the additional focal species of the Waterbird Survey, other than the Lewis's woodpecker, are these species listed here. I'm not going to read through them all, but the reason that these are the focal species is because these are the species that kind of most likely have the best ability to trigger this important bird area status for our Columbia wetlands. For instance, if we had all those volunteers out there on any given day at the 40 different sites counting birds, and we were able to identify 340 trumpeter swans across the wetlands complex, well, then that would then trigger that important bird area status for the wetlands for that year. And we would need to do that for at least 5 years in a row before we could be considered to have that status. I just want to add, too, that a lot of these other species are also listed under the provincial government and or by the federal government, and we have no data on these birds. We have absolutely very little idea of how significant this habitat is for these species of interest. And so the data will be important not only for this Waterbird Survey, but for numerous other agencies that would like to know more about what we have here in our system. So further benefits of the Columbia Wetlands Waterbird Survey would be that it could be really good for our economy if we were able to achieve important bird area status for our area. Birders tend to be like really nerdy about birds, and they will travel very far distances and spend a lot of money to go and observe birds that they know are going to be there and they have a really good chance of seeing. So if we had that, I showed you that map earlier, if we were one of those dots on the map, it would bring people here to see birds. Important bird area would again be a significant conservation tool, and it would enable us to collect that baseline data that is so critically lacking. And that could be useful for monitoring population trends of these different birds. And also, it could be really valuable in the case of some sort of disasters, such as a train derailment in the Columbia Wetlands, which is not, that it could happen for sure. There's several trains going up and down the wetland system every day, and so it would be good if that did happen to have some sort of baseline information to know what we had before, we work towards determining how much was lost. This waterbird survey will also help fulfill Ramsar and W wildlife management area responsibilities of the provincial government, rather. And this program really has the opportunity to engage local citizens in a real science opportunity. There's really not any other program like that, in the basin that I'm aware of that is this large scale, and certainly not for the Columbia Valley. And we have a lot of volunteers coming to Wildsight often for asking for opportunities to participate and volunteer, and so now we have sort of this real sort of hands-on activity that people can get involved with, in addition to other things that you can become involved with as well. And having people out in that incredible Columbia Wetlands landscape can make people become more connected to the landscape and also to the wildlife that require that habitat to survive and persist into the future. And some of the longer-term benefits would include potential opportunities for university students, so it could bring further environmental, biological professionals into our area. We would also like to develop a Columbia Wetlands boardwalk and an eventual establishment of a bird banding station to start monitoring songbird populations. And so that's it for me today. Thank you guys so much for having me. And if you're interested in volunteering or learning anything further about the Wetlands Survey, please feel free to contact me anytime. Thank you.